The show will start shortly, so while you wait, let's get to know your hosts. Kim and Carlos are a married couple, grew up in the same small town, and met because of sports. Here's a blast from the past of what we were like back then. Fun facts about Carlos: he was our high school basketball star, and he ran a leg of the Olympic torch run for the 1984 Olympics. I was a freshman when Carlos was a senior. He wrote these messages to me in our yearbook back in 1985. We decided to start our podcast in 2023. Our first season used this cover art. The first season was our memoir about getting your child through cancer. The name of our show has deep meaning for us because doctors would always blow us off with these two words, typical and unique. We made this montage part of our intro for a while.
Hit with so many typicallys and uniques.
Oh, yes, that is very typical. We see it all the time.
Don't worry about it. That's typical, you know.
Oh, every child is unique, so we can't say what is typical.
That's typical. See you later.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Well, that's unique. We don't really see that very much.
Yeah, typical or unique.
Since then, we took a break from podcasting and came back with season 2 as a discussion podcast, mostly discussing true crime. We can talk about almost anything on here, though. And we thank you for joining us. Now, if you're ready, let's get into it. We're going to get that sound button down yet. Welcome to Typically Unique. I'm Kim Aponte, and I'm here with my husband, Carlos.
Hello. And today we're going to put a bow on the Howard Bloom book, A Night Comes Calling.
When the night comes falling.
Oh, I did it. Shoot. And I practiced before
we
this.
We practiced.
Why? Oh, man. But we did 5 different episodes. There's 6 parts of the book and then the epilogue, but the part 6 and the epilogue were kind of short. So we meshed all those into the final one that we did. But we did 5 different episodes. Hopefully folks have checked those out. So we're going to freelance a little bit on this one. Hopefully we get some engagement with folks who join our live, and we can talk about it a little bit. But
we wanted to pick out some of the highlights and things that stood out to us, connect some things to the theories that are out there or some current events that have happened around the case. So
right,
please chime in.
And we had some comments in each episode that I think both of us found a little bit interesting as well. So we can maybe pull a few of those out and try to talk to a little bit about some of those. So, did we get started?
Yeah, we're going to go through the parts, see what comes up as we go.
Okay.
If anything stood out to you, leave it in the comments also.
Right. So, first of all, we'll probably have to say this a few times, but we listened to the book.
Yeah, we listened to the audiobook.
Yeah, we didn't read the book, but we
saved time.
Yeah, we listened to the book, and the style of writing that this author used was called narrative nonfiction. So I had no idea what that meant. I just understood the nonfiction part. So Kim looked into that a little bit. She was aware of it. She's a elementary school language arts teacher, so she's aware of that. And narrative nonfiction means
that it's based on true facts. So you're taking a true story, but then you have some creative liberties to add to it. So to create a story flow, you make it, instead of it just being pure nonfiction where it's just facts, you're just turning it into a story. And the reason why I wanted to be prepared with that is because I knew when the book first came out, the online community was not embracing it. So
yeah, it's very
that's why we read it, so you don't have to.
That's right. And we shared the same audio novel, so it wasn't two sales. It was just,
one
one.
sale.
But we also realized that, there was a lot of backlash about the book, and how could this author take these liberties? And I think the author explains it pretty well, and we'll talk about that at the end. But let's dive into, I guess, the first part. And, one of the parts about this book, it starts out with, kind of discussions in the car, and there's, a bunch of happenings in the book. But the one part that really stood out to me, because there was a lot of energy around the fact of, were they following Brian and his father when they were coming from Washington to Pennsylvania? Were they being followed? Were those stops planned so they could get a look at his hands? I had heard, and all this. And who was behind it? Was it Moscow? Was it folks in Pullman? Was it the FBI?
The FBI.
Like who was, or was it just the Indiana police stumbled across this car for traffic violations that seemed pretty lame, but still a traffic violation, I guess. But to me, the one thing about this that was telling was that there was a plane
I
that
didn't
was
know that.
following their route from Washington to Pennsylvania. And they weren't following them at first because they lost them initially. And I also found out in the book that they found them somewhere in Colorado because of a traffic light license plate reader.
Yeah. I think they were probably freaking out when. Did any of you watching know that there was a plane following?
Yeah,
that was new to me. I didn't know that.
That was brand new to me, and that they found them because of a traffic light camera in Colorado. They narrowed down where they were. They ended up picking them up, and then they started following them because they didn't take a direct route from Washington to Pennsylvania. They took the very kind of extended route. I think they went south, and
supposedly to avoid a snowstorm,
but or the police.
And because the cops were expecting them to take that other route
for sure.
Yeah. But again, that is, I mean, I don't know who his sources are. So someone is asking, is that a fact that he was followed by a plane? So it's stated in the book. If you actually have the book, he said at the end, if it's in quotes, it is like a fact. And he also doesn't release all his sources. So yeah.
So
I don't know if that is a fact or not, but interesting nonetheless.
So I think what he's stating in the book is, and that's a really good question, right? Because I think there's a lot of this throughout the book, right?
Because that's a huge resource expense to pay for a plane to fly across the country to follow somebody. I don't know. That's a suspect.
I don't know.
That's a suspect.
If there's somebody out there who's murdered 4 college age students, I'm throwing.
But I still say grab him when he's in Washington.
And
don't follow him across the country
until you have the DNA and you can match it all. This is where we start.
And I think that's another thing that makes this case suspicious. I mean, there's a million true crime cases that catch their guy with the evidence they need without having to go across the country to get some trash.
No, exactly. And, if you're trying to make a case on somebody that, hey, I saw this guy walking down the street covered in blood with a knife in his teeth, half a mile from a crime scene, I'm picking him up.
Right.
But if I got blurry car video and maybe a name of somebody, and supposedly, Pullman didn't even have not Pullman, Moscow didn't even have the name at this point.
Right.
So
allegedly,
and the
supposedly.
FBI was using some, tactics to actually get his name and was kind of holding it close to the vest. Yeah, I'm throwing Fort Knox to make sure I got eyes on this person, to make sure that there's no more, mass killings going on. That's just me.
Well, and you made me think of, I keep saying on every episode, all of the either weird coincidences or shady contradictions or just contradictions that keep happening. And this is just another example of when he's driving across the country, just trying to drive home, and he does get stopped in Indiana. No one wanted to claim that, and or why did it happen? The FBI's like, wasn't us. We didn't do it.
Yeah.
And then in the book, it says it was the FBI. So, right? Who was following him? It was the FBI because
following him, but they didn't order the stops.
Oh, right. But they're following him.
Yeah, they're following him. They're doing surveillance.
So now they're saying that was a coincidence. I don't know.
So I guess to the, the commenter's question, do we know it as fact? And I guess that goes back to how we started this episode, right? That the author is taking fact as he has heard it through sources, right? And he just didn't kind of single source this. He tried to double source a lot of these facts. He did have some, for lack of a better term, informants within the FBI that was feeding him some information. He is a kind of a lifelong investigative reporter, so he's made some connections over the years. And so he was very careful about some of the things that, he was trying to state as, in this case, maybe a fact, where he was taking liberties in how he was telling the story, like the plane, dove in close, and things like that. He didn't say that in the book.
Or the wolf comparison that he gets to later.
Yeah,
that was crazy.
I think that's where he kind of took the liberties. But with the facts as he heard them, that's what he was kind of offering in the book. And this was one that I had not heard previously.
Well, there are some true crime sleuths on here on this platform that are very good about verifying things, getting police reports, getting body cam footage. He didn't do that. He didn't have police reports at the end of his book or anything like that.
No.
And so I would just say it's just speculation. And the only facts that we're truly going to get are either those reports, like those court documents that we get, and waiting for the trial. Like those are the only verified facts we're going to get is when we get to that trial. So I just took the book for what it was, just another person making some speculations, sharing what he heard. I heard, we hear that all the time. So
yeah,
that's it.
And so that, I guess this little early come right out of the gate debate is good because it leads me to the first comment that I want to read that we got, I think in our very first episode, and Mark at Mark and Betty wrote in the comments in our first episode of this that it says brilliant channel. Well, I love that. Thank you.
Good compliment. That was nice.
It's nice to watch a nice discussion about this case. So I guess I'll kind of respond to that and say, we are a married couple. So after this show's over, we have to live together, so we do disagree on this case vehemently. I am a guilter. She's a pro-burger. But I think one of the things that is good about our discussions and our marriage is that we'd like to see both sides of all issues. Doesn't mean we're going to agree with them. We don't talk politics here, but whether it's political, whether it's, about,
we have good debates about that too.
Religion or, some of the things that are taboo to talk about, or
current events,
true crime, world events that are going on. We always read the headline, we watch the news, but then we like to dig deeper and have those conversations. So we feel like we are fully informed and we understand all points of view, even if we're on the same side of an issue. We'll be like, well, why? Right. We'll keep asking those questions. Why? She uses root cause analysis at school. I use root cause analysis at work. So we've been professionally trained in that area.
That would be an interesting approach. If you guys don't know that, that's like what would you call that? A strategy, a tool of asking 5 whys to get to the root of a problem. That would be interesting to do it on this case.
There's many
right?
ways to do root cause analysis, and
Well,
5
yeah.
whys is one.
That's one. Yeah.
But yes, it is. But we kind of use that personally for us here. So I think that was my kind of overall take on part 1. What was your overall take on part 1 of the book?
So yeah, I went to the comments too. And because the author does talk about the military BK Kopaka in part 1, and I've got a theory going.
Wait a minute. Military BK.
So Brent Kopaka.
Okay.
So the other BK. So that's another coincidence that there's 2 people with the same initials that have. They keep claiming that he's not involved in this case. However, the judge and the defense attorney both slipped and said his name. They caught themselves like midway, but you can clear. And I tried to find the clips. I'm still searching for them, which hearings those were in. But that's not a coincidence that you're in a hearing for Brian Kohberger and you're accidentally saying this other person's name that supposedly has nothing to do with it. That just told me he's on their mind and they're talking about him. I don't know. But here's the comment. Yeah. So, and we get some information in our comments. That's very interesting. Mm-hmm. So this person said, I just heard about a week ago and I've been downplaying this person calls him BK student. That's Brian Kohberger, and BK, the ex-military, that there was a connection from Pennsylvania to Washington. And he supposedly got this information from a retired military person that spoke about it. So I'm wondering if that was done on a live show somewhere or something. I don't know if I saw that one. If anybody saw it, please let me know. And so they knew each other back in Pennsylvania, supposedly. And that they reconnected again when they came back out to Washington. So that's the theory. So this is all going to come together. This is all going to come together with with what I think.
Okay.
The Kopaka, Brent Kopaka, didn't have a driver's license because he had a lot of mental health issues, and I guess apparently this person's saying DUIs. I don't know. So that he didn't have a car or definitely couldn't drive. And that his girlfriend lived near the 1122 house. And I have heard that. I've heard other people talk about that. And so that gives a reason for them being together, if they were together, and being near the house. That gives Brian Kohberger a reason for being in the area. That's why I liked this comment. And I've heard a lot of people talk about it everywhere. I don't know. Maybe that's why they've slipped and said his name a couple times, because he's not alive anymore. So he cannot be a physical witness, but I wonder if do they have his cell phone data? Do they have anything like that they're going to use? And so this person also said they like to go to the park. So I don't know, that just them being together, especially because we did an episode on the car routes and I mapped it out through Google Maps, and they have him leaving the house at a certain time. Wasn't it like 2:47 or something like that? Right. So at that time, and they catch him on all these cameras near his apartment until he gets up to that Route 270. But before he gets to that Route 270, they have him on another street, and there is about an 8-minute chunk of time where it's not accounted for before he gets to the intersection. Well, don't you know, there's like that side street they saw him on could cross 270 and go over to where Brent Kopaka lives. Like that's in the area. There's missing time. So I don't know. I don't think that's crazy.
It's a theory.
And there's a suggestion in the comments of a channel to watch that has some more information on that. So yeah, Crime Circus. I love that channel.
Yep. Okay. So
that was a lot just from our first episode. So if you didn't watch that one, there's a lot of details in there.
yeah, so this you know, commenter putting this post, what is that? What is that?
I think this all goes back to the Persian rug theory. That's what we're calling it.
Oh, I don't
Instead
know
of
this
saying
one.
the word. Yeah, you do, like the cartels and all of that.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm just trying to be careful with our language because I don't know
Oh, okay.
what will
Narcotics?
happen on
Is that
here.
what you're talking
Yeah.
about? Okay. All right. Got it.
So yeah, that's what I think.
Okay. Yeah. So interesting. I do remember you making kind of a big deal when either the defense or the prosecutor accidentally slipped up and said,
Oh yeah.
back as to the
I'm gonna find those clips.
Yeah.
I'm gonna find those clips because it happened twice, 2 different times,
Yeah.
2 different people. And it's interesting, if Brent Kopacka has nothing to do with this case, then why put him in a book about the Idaho 4
well,
people? So
all right, I'll tell you that because I'm going to bring it full circle now. Let's do that.
Okay.
So one of the things that Brian was having a conversation about in the car, this long 4-day or whatever day cross-country trip, was about this guy, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that's why it was in the book.
Supposedly, that's one thing that the author said. I spoke to people who spoke to people who spoke to people and said these were because he did say at the end, I did not speak directly to his dad.
Correct. Yeah. So, but friends and family members very close to them.
Yeah. And I do think
who shared his thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
So again, if this guy's putting his 20 plus year reputation on the line for, Brent Koberger or, right. I mean, Brett Koberger, Brian Koberger, Brent Kopacka. Look, I'm doing it now. It just seems a little weird that, there's probably people who be like, yeah, I did talk to him. I'm not going to tell you what I said, but I did talk to him.
And that first part's all about, them starting their car ride home and the dad's perspective. So he spent a lot of time just trying to do that. So then the second part is about the kids, the children's story, he called it.
Yes. And he did kind of go into each one of the victims a little bit and talked about them. But I'd asked you this question during this episode, and we can get into more of the meat of this, but I never came. Yeah.
Can I talk about the title of this part first before we go into the content? So what I did was, because I know how the book is perceived in the community, instead of just putting book discussion as our title, I picked out the key topics of what was talked about in the book. So, or in that part of the book that we're going to be talking about. So in this part, he talks all about the victims and the roommates. And so I called it Adam and the Range Rover and I think FBI, or I don't know. I put like 3 different, and I got called out about that a little bit in the comments.
Well, I wasn't going there just now, but I will pivot and go there now.
Oh, you don't have to, but I just wanted to bring that up about
but that's
the
perfect.
title.
That's a good segue. So one of the comments that we got was, I see no relevance to Adam or the Range Rover, which was in our thumbnail that Kim had titled for the episode, right? And we talked a little bit about, Adam and the Range Rover a little bit, but it wasn't overly significant to me. And I kind of thought it was, okay, maybe this is a conspiracy thing that, her side has been talking a lot about. So, now today, I'm still a little confused about Adam and the Range Rover. So I'm going to kick that comment to you and say, tell me about Adam and the Range Rover, because I don't know much about it.
Well, I was just in a live a few minutes ago where that's all they were talking about was Adam. Right. A lot of people still suspect him. Adam is the ex-boyfriend of Kaylee.
Okay.
His alibi is not, his alibi is I was sleeping. So how do you verify that.
Right.
His roommate who could verify it is also probably a suspect, because that's the Adam that there's a video where it's Maddie, what did you say to Adam?
Yes.
So if that's another suspect, they're providing alibis for each other. So that's suspicious. He would have a motive if he didn't want to break up, or in Kaylee's leaving town and they share a dog and she's planning to take the dog. And so that's all of the discussion around him, that there is a motive. He lived close by. He could see her room from his apartment. I mean, there's a lot. His agility, he's an athlete. He's a college tennis player. One thing I wasn't sure about that I heard being discussed about Adam, or I'm sorry, I'm saying the wrong name. That's Jack D. My brain. Everybody in the comments is probably, or listening, is like, what is she talking about? So that's Jack D that I was just talking about, the ex-boyfriend. Adam is the person that was at the corner club and Jack D's roommate. And that's when there's that video and they said, Maddie, what did you say to Adam? So I thought, there's a lot of discussion about the narcotic motive. And I just feel like, because there's a comment later that, the victims didn't have anything in their system. Nobody's stashing anything in that house. And I don't think it's about that. I think it's about information. I think it's about knowing something that shouldn't have been said. And it could be related to that. And it was obviously said to Adam and got out to the wrong people, frats. That's what I think. So that's Adam. And then the Range Rover, I don't think that went. He talks about it in the book. That was Kaylee's car. And, it was just, a lot of people thought, how did she afford the Range Rover? But in the book, he says that they thoroughly investigated the previous owners of the car. Carlos did a funny little description about how they went to go talk to him.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Sorry for the Jack D and Adam mix up.
Okay. All right. So that reminds me of who Adam is, and it reminds me of the Range Rover discussion, because I saw this comment. I was a little unclear what that was. So, okay. So, my comment about this chapter before we get to yours is, I had asked you during the episode, how many people currently was actively living in the house at the time of the murder, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And so I was going to come back to that statement because I wanted to kind of prove a little point or state a little point about that. And I never did. So when I watched it later, I was like, wait a minute, I never explained why I was trying to set this up. So let me try it again.
Right.
And then maybe I'll go to what my point was going to be. Okay. So, all right. Whoosh. Hey, how many people were actively living in the house when this, mass killing took place?
4.
And who were they?
Kaylee, Maddie, Bethany. Wait, who did I say? Kaylee. Oh, no, you didn't say living. You said who was supposed to be in that house.
Supposed to be in that house. Right.
Oh, no, you did say active listening. Okay. So living in the house. Yep. Maddie. Xana. Bethany. And Dylan.
And what was the name of the one girl that Xana, who's the name of the one girl that was Kaylee?
Kaylee, she's still on the lease. Kaylee.
All right. So she doesn't live in the house she didn't live at the house at the time. She had moved out. You had stated she's actively on the lease, but she lives somewhere else. And she actually came back to visit because she wanted to show off the Range Rover.
Yeah.
Okay. So there were 4 people living in the house at the time.
Yeah.
At the time of the killings, there were 6 people in the house.
Yes.
Okay. Kaylee came back and Ethan was there with it was staying over. My point was going to be this person. Okay, let's even take Koberger out of the equation. But this person who came to the house either was told to or was going to kill 4 people. And once that task was completed, they were out. So if it was like a hit or something, hey, you got 4 people you need to take care of in that house. Once you're done with 4, get out of there.
I thought that was a good point by you, but you would think if it's a hit like that who you're going after, because the boss is certainly going to be mad if you don't get the right people.
You would think.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, 4 people were actively living there. Should have been there, and 4 people were deceased. And I thought that was somewhat of a coincidence. But that was the only point I was going to make. It wasn't earth-shattering or groundbreaking, but I just never finished my point. So there it is. All right. Part 3. Part 3 of the book was we did get a comment that I guess I'd like to read.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that they talked about in the book was, the actual crime. And Rebecca Gomez wrote that, in her opinion, Kaylee was worse because she woke up and fought back. I believe Maddie stayed asleep as she was very intoxicated. They didn't state it in the book that, she was intoxicated and unable to. Maddie was very intoxicated and, couldn't fight back, but did state that, and it's been a big problem, the timeline of 4 unalivings in 9 minutes or less, right? And how could that possibly happen? And we had even debated, why did some have defensive wounds and some, didn't? And if someone's asleep, they wouldn't. If someone woke up and then had some defensive wounds or had a chance to evade or fight back a little bit, that they would. Still curious about,
that didn't come out right away either.
No.
The first defensive wounds we heard about was Xana. And then it was way later, just this past, like maybe winter time, is when they came out with more information about how Kaylee and Maddie were found. And it was actually Kaylee's mom that shared that.
Right.
So because of her positioning and the way she was found is why they're suspecting. Now, maybe her dad might have, I think he said earlier on that she fought, but we just hadn't, that just seemed like, I don't know, an opinion or him talking about it. But the way the mom said it more recently made it seem like, wow. Yeah.
Now, so that was kind of how, how did this happen so quick? But the most controversial part of this part of the book was, why did it take so long to call 911? Why did it take so long for, the police to show up, or EMTs, and then finally the chief investigator, and then the coroner, or the medical examiner? Like, why did it take so long? And there was some explanation in the book as to why all that happened. But it wasn't necessarily overly clarifying. But to me, I think I was interested to find out, and I didn't say his name, but that when the call was made, someone came over, like one of the girls called a friend.
They called a friend first.
The friend came over, supposedly walked in the house, immediately came back out, used that. Who was it? Who was the one that called?
We're not sure. They just say a roommate's phone. Everybody's assuming it's Dylan.
Okay. So Dylan. So then he grabs Dylan's phone and then makes the call to 911.
Yes. And we have the PCA. We've gone over the PCA in an episode. I was just watching another creator that was reading from the PCA again, and it actually says in there they called from inside the house. I just thought that was interesting because from what I understand, you wouldn't want to be in there for any time at all. So, but that is the way it's worded. whether that was intentional or not, I don't know.
Right.
But when you're talking about the timing, in our episode that we did where we discussed part 3 that we're talking about, I had a lot to say about the coroner.
Yes, you did.
And so, the coroner, I think in most places, I know in our state it is too, it's just like an elected position, and you don't really have to have a medical background to do that job. So I don't know. I think that's weird. But I looked up the state of Idaho's information about the coroner just to see what their job was, because when you watch TV shows, they show up, they say the time of death, they're looking at the condition of the body, they're getting some of that initial information about the victim to pass on or document or whatever. But that's not really the case. They just kind of show up, and let me read exactly what it said, because they serve to investigate unalivings in which certain circumstances have occurred. The coroner determines the manner and cause of death. And then it was talking about an inquest. They can do an inquest, which I know that was weird. That sounds like a special hearing to make sure all the evidence was collected or something. So I would be curious if that was done in this case, because they would only do that in a high profile case like this. It says, if necessary, they hold an inquest and determine the facts as to how, when, where, and by what means the victim came to their unaliving. Interesting. Very interesting. Because typically they just turn that over to the law enforcement. They just let the law enforcement. So they're just going to say,
let the law enforcement what?
Do their investigation.
Oh, okay.
Do their investigation. And she's saying, what happened sounds actually backwards to this. She's saying, I didn't show up right away because I was letting law enforcement do their investigation. Well, according to this, you're supposed to show up and say, yes, we have a deceased person, and here is how they died and why they died. That's what this says.
Yeah, I think
that's why I was questioning it. And there's questions about that too, because apparently a couple of the officers made sure they were at the autopsy. I don't know if that's typical for them to be there either. But yeah,
they were there in Silence of the Lambs. So
that's funny.
Jodie Foster was right there, so I'm going to take that movie as
I guess
as true life,
especially if there's a certain information you're looking for. I could see that. Here's go ahead.
No. Run.
Something else just medically related to this case. I was listening to one of the previous hearings, and Ann Taylor, the defense attorney, mentioned that she had asked for x-rays from the autopsy, and it was just another piece of evidence that they weren't turning over right away. So I just thought that was interesting. Like, why not? They're x-rays. And then also, how interested in the x-rays are they going to be? Are they really looking at types of weapons, types of wounds? Because a lot of people are speculating that, and the dad of Kaylee said they're different. They were different. So
yeah. Ooh, lots to unpack there. So let's go back to the coroner. So the coroner is, so what's the difference between a coroner and a medical examiner?
So in the document that I had, the medical examiner is the person that actually does the autopsy. That has to be a physician, that has to be a medical physician. But it did say that it's the coroner's job to reach out to the qualified medical examiner to have it done.
Right.
So it doesn't seem like it's an automatic process of a specific same person every time in Idaho, from what I read.
So based on the true crime shows and just crime shows that I've watched over the years, not saying it's actual law, but there could be a crime scene. It could be self-inflicted or, by other means. And the police do their investigation, right? They take, once the coroner comes or the medical examiner, somebody has to take the body, right? Take possession of the body to go for an autopsy if it's so deemed necessary, right? So if they take the body, it isn't until they do the autopsy that they determine manner of death. And it's either homicide, suicide, undetermined, or natural, or something like that, or the 4 that I've seen. There could be more, but those are the 4 that I've seen. Based on that determination, it either clicks in law enforcement or clicks them out, right?
I think they have to show up anytime law enforcement shows up.
You're right. I'm past that. I'm already at the,
okay, I don't know.
We're doing the autopsy.
Okay.
We've done the autopsy.
Okay.
After the autopsy is over, they have to they have to check a box. And it says
manner and cause of death.
Manner and cause. If it is not homicide or undetermined, law enforcement really doesn't have a legal reason to
do an investigation. Yeah.
So holding off or quarantining off a crime scene before that determination is made, I think, is good police work in doing that. And you'd have to do it anyway, because it's going to be the next day or the day after before you get the official word.
I know, but I'm just thinking about, what everybody talks about with that 8-hour delay.
Yeah. That's
and
crazy.
Then, there was food purchased supposedly. So, and food eaten. They went to a food place, the grub truck before the girls came home,
right.
The DoorDash in the middle of the night. So you hear all the time on those shows that they're looking at stomach contents to help determine time of death is a big factor in this case.
For sure.
If it showed that, the food eaten around 2 a.m. is still like undigested, then that tells a lot. Then if it didn't, and then that would be like, well, then it couldn't have happened at 4 a.m. Like, I think that's key. I think that's going to be a key part.
Oh, I'm sure they're going to bring that up because the 2 girls ordered 2 meals at the grub truck, right?
One meal they were going to share.
Yes. All right. So yeah, I guess the time of, hey, when did they eat that? Did they eat that in the car on the way home? Did they wait till they got home? Yeah.
I think it would tell a lot.
Yeah. Sure. Next part of the book.
Another big one.
Yeah. I don't even know what part we're on anymore.
We're on 4.
4. Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things, well, I guess let me go to the comment first.
Yes, do that. And I'm going to type something real quick.
Sure. So one of the things they talked about in this next part is a lot about the evidence, especially the IgG and the touch DNA. So I had heard a lot about touch DNA. And so I'm curious because in the book, Howard Bloom states very clearly that the DNA that was gathered was from a fingerprint on the button of the knife sheet. So this Tammy Rose 5234 wrote, where has it been stated by documentation it was touch DNA? I don't personally have that answer. And it has been said they had DNA, but the first time I heard it, it was touch DNA from the media. Can anyone enlighten me? So all I know is what I heard in the book, heard, because I didn't read it, I listened to it as an audiobook. What I heard in the book was that the DNA came from a part of a fingerprint on the button of the knife sheath, and that the DNA was extracted from that fingerprint. That's what I heard in the book.
Yeah.
So I know there's a lot of concern about, okay, is touch DNA, single source DNA, is it good DNA, all that stuff. I don't know. But what that led to, which was very interesting for me, was this IgG, right? Which is, I drew a blank. Genetic genealogy, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Investigative
Genetic genealogy. And this genealogy was done supposedly only on this unknown DNA that was extracted from the crime scene. You've made mention many times about there was another DNA, male DNA, unknown in the house, and then one on the glove outside the house. But those didn't go through investigative genetic genealogy.
Right.
Only this one went through that, and that's how they got Brian Koberger's name.
Mm-hmm.
I was also interested to find out, and then I want to hear your thoughts on this. I was also interested to find out that the FBI did this on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And and when they got the name, they held it. They didn't give it to.
I know. It's so, I don't understand.
And in the book, Howard Bloom states maybe what some of the reasons were why they held it. They should have just shared it. They should have shared it with the prosecution. They should have shared it with defense, whenever, wherever, all that, but just didn't happen. So that was my take on that one.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm playing around with buttons.
Yeah. Do you want to pull a comment up on the screen?
Not right now. I was trying to do something else.
Okay.
So, okay. You're talking about the DNA.
I am.
Okay. So I don't know a document where that all that you just said was like verified or whatever about this touch DNA or anything like that. That was a good question to call that out.
It's in the PCA.
I do know
that's
that
the
they
only
had
document I know they stated DNA.
Yeah, but they just stated DNA.
Yeah.
But they had a hearing. They had a whole hearing early on. I think it was one of the earliest ones where the defense, I think they wanted to get out ahead of that, like right off the bat. So they called, once they caught wind that this is, he's arrested because they have DNA.
Yeah.
And they called expert witnesses that do the genetic genealogy, just like CeCe Moore. So we watched that show she had. They do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Also, so here's the comment I got that made me think about what I'm saying. I think this was Heather that wrote this. Yep, Heather Fitzgerald. And she said, Bicca Barlow. Wait a minute, which one goes first? Yeah, Bicca Barlow's declaration. So she was one of the witnesses that testified, I think, or is an attorney. I can't remember. Whatever percentage of a complete profile was found is however much matches BK. Think about that for a second. There was only a percentage of a complete profile. You can't ever narrow it down any further than whatever the percent of a complete profile was found. Also, the profile is incomplete. It is partial. The sheath profile will never be a complete, full genetic profile. So
I have no idea what that means. So enlighten me.
So it sounds like they did not get a full, the DNA, what do they call that? Strands thing. Mm-hmm. So, and all the pieces and parts they're looking at. We know a little bit about this because the medical journey we had with one of our children, there's many components that make up your DNA. So it sounds like some of it's missing. I have heard this talked about on news shows and stuff.
But it still links you. It doesn't exclude you.
So we know, because our son had a bone marrow transplant, that you match other people in the world. There are parts of that's how you're able to get a bone marrow transplant, because they can find a complete stranger in a total different country that shares same matching DNA components. That's how it works. We lived it. So I don't know, but it would be interesting. And one of the things I want to do is go find this testimony, because I think there's going to be some good information in there.
So let me say this, and I'm not disagreeing 100% with what you say, because in our family, Kim is in charge of health and safety because she is, all things dealing with the hospital and all that. She takes care of all that. She has final say in everything health and safety. However, when we did the bone marrow transplant, what I remember was, and I'm not saying what you're saying is incorrect, but I remember there has to be some markers.
Yeah, that's what they're called, markers.
Not DNA, but some markers. Like, we have to have the same maybe blood type. Just because I have O positive and you have O positive doesn't make us DNA matches. It makes us a marker match. And I think you're trying to bring in DNA into markers that
maybe. Okay. He does have a point.
Okay. All right.
But I do still think it drills down further into some of those markers might be inclusive in there. I don't know.
Well, and I guess what I'll say, and again, I'll let you run with this. I'm not endorsing it, but I'll let you run with it. But what I do think is, even if you get partials of DNA, that's where sometimes they will go to, hey, we could probably match just a little bit better with the mother of this child. So I forget the name of that.
There is a name for it. Yeah.
So, I wouldn't start excluding DNA because it is the air tag of human beings.
Yeah.
So I'd be careful to be like, hey, let's throw this out, because it is the scientific, checkpoint for humanity right now, unfortunately. And, so I think shooting arrows at that is kind of, I would rather if I was a pro burger, I'd go down the line that, hey, I go to knife shows all the time, and I open up knife sheaths and look at, a gazillion knives, and my fingerprint could have been on one K-bar knife from the show I went into Spokane. But I would not.
Spokane.
Yeah, I know. That was being funny. We messed that up in a few episodes ago. But I would not, start saying, okay, the science is, uber flawed.
No, you're right. I was talking about markers, but I'm still curious about this partial that just makes it seem crazy. But I pulled up, so there's some people in the chat, so I want to interact. It was Heather Fitzgerald. Yeah, I think it's probably the Heather we're all thinking about. That was the comment that I read. I want to say hello, Twiz. Thanks for being here. Too Fast for Fleas. I love like that name. Hello there. All right.
Oh, I put that little thing up there.
Oh, it's my mouse.
No, that little.
Oh, the comment.
Oh, cool.
Yep.
Nice.
I'm learning some tools here, you guys.
Yeah, we're learning.
Learning some tools. All right, we're at the last part of the book, which was the best. That's okay.
Okay.
I thought it was the best because the author really went into sharing with the defense that they were digging into the cartel theory that that I was talking about earlier in the live. If you missed that, I went hard on that.
So I think the last part for me of the book, what the one thing. So this was we did a 5-part. So to recap, so maybe some folks who joined a little bit late, we did a 5-part series where we talked about Howard Bloom's book, When the Night Comes Falling. And we talked, there's 6 parts in the book with an epilogue. We did part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. And then we did 5, 6 in the epilogue all in one, because those last parts were a little bit short. So if you haven't seen those and you want to, hear about what was in the book, and some of our thoughts of that. You can go back and watch those. I actually went back and watched them, and I learned something that you were saying that maybe I wasn't paying attention during the episode, but I was like, oh, that was interesting. Yeah. So it's good. And if you have watched them, or watched all 5, I recommend that. But
yeah, I don't know if everybody realized we did 5 different parts on the book, because I didn't necessarily title them book discussion 1, book discussion 2, but there are 5 different ones. And some of them had way more views than other ones for whatever reason,
Yeah.
maybe the title that I put on them or whatever.
Or
But
it's just the algorithm.
if you missed a chunk of the book, the videos are out there. We summarized all the parts.
Yeah. So I like that, because now we have that,
it's a good reference. Yeah.
Because a year from now, when the trial starts,
oh man,
I want to go back.
That's going to be gold. If that,
see how close Bloom was to all the stuff that he says he gathered during all this. But
that's crazy. Yeah.
Mark and Betty had wrote that it's nice. They thought that our show that
big compliment
we were doing,
they gave. Sorry.
Yeah, it's nice to watch the discussion about this case, because I think some of the things that I've seen online is some people talking to us, and we're talking about it to each other. And I think
just that we have like a unique
a unique way of, because
we've always done it this way.
Exactly. So I think they like the interaction of, I'm not very popular on this channel because I am the guilter in this. So.
I tell him he's more loved than he thinks.
No, I don't think so. But I do like to listen to all of the alternate theories, because there's a lot of smoke going on with the police and the sororities and fraternities, people in the house, people out, connected to the house some way, the school, the police departments, both schools, not just the school, but both schools, WSU
everything
and Idaho.
You named is so suspicious.
And how next year, when this trial takes place, defense has a plethora of theories that they could throw out. They don't have to prove, someone else did it, but they just have to create reasonable doubt. And I think there's a lot of reasonable doubt out there. So it's going to be tough on the prosecution. I also think our format is, for the most part, we listen to each other's, viewpoints.
Yep.
Kim will come out and say, you're completely wrong. That's not right. You got tunnel vision, and all that.
I get a little bit more fired up than he is, but my loudness is not anger. It's just loudness.
But I like to hear both sides, and she's into it. So I like the format that we have, and hopefully it resonates with you that, these conversations can be had about this case. And, I think we're keeping each other on each other's toes. I also want to say, in the last part of this book, when I listened to the book from Howard Bloom, a part of me I felt bad for Steve. Steve is brought up, whose father? Kaylee's father. Steve was brought up a lot, and he was so taken advantage of. And I just felt, I don't know, near the end of the book, I was like, it almost snapped me into reality of, the victims' families, not just the father.
It made it so real when he shared about what Steve went through. That was a very good part of the book too.
I mean, people were just conning him, and I remember just near the end of it, I was like, oh man, I almost feel a little about,
because I could relate to him, because
I'd go for everything.
I was like Steve with my child who had a life-threatening medical issue that we battled for a couple of years. And I was just like that in that area. Like, just, I was on everybody's neck. I was doing stuff on my own. I was researching. I was calling people. I'd go above people. I would
through people.
So I get it. Like I feel every ounce of that man
And
when he talks.
And when you're desperate, you grasp at anything. If anybody is handing you or offering you an olive branch of hope, you're going to take it, because could you imagine the guilt if you didn't?
Right.
You know, and that's what we suffered through, you a lot, right? Because, you know, there was a lot of, you know,
always second guessing or what if, or
And if you didn't take, if someone called and said, hey, I got information, and you're like, oh man, you know, this doesn't sound real, I'm going to blow it off.
Or they want money. Like in his case, you're going to come up with the money.
You come up with the money. And I felt so bad for the guy. I was just, I don't know. It was rough. So for me, the way the book ended was two ways. One, this, you know, my sorrow for Steve, you know, and the humanity of all this, you know. Sometimes I personally forget that, you know, there's 4 college age kids that passed away, and our kids are just above that college age, you know. And it's I couldn't imagine that, you know. And then the father's grief, and then just him being put through the ringer. That was number one. And number two is, and we talked about this at the beginning, the author explains where he got all this information from. And the reason I mention that is because I think he predicted that he was going to get a lot of backlash in this book. So he talked about that this is narrative nonfiction, you know, so there was a story within a story. And he tried to talk about his sources as much as he could, you know, and who are some of the people he reached out to. And because we listened to the book but didn't read the book, he stated anywhere in the book where you see quotations, that is a direct on the record fact. Yeah. So you could take that 100% to the bank. If it was hearsay from hearsay, even though he had it, you know, double source, he wouldn't do that. He also stated in the book a few times,
and we didn't know, we couldn't differentiate that because we were just listening to it. So we don't know.
But he also stated in the book that he said fact and then made a statement, you know, fact, and then made a statement. So those were the only times we knew.
Well, he only did that in one part.
Yeah, those were the only time. He did it 3 times. Those are the only time that we knew for a fact that it was fact. Yeah. But yeah, that was it.
And here, I just thought he was like, just emphasizing.
I'll be emphasizing. Yeah. So, and what was your take on the last part of the book and the epilogue and all that?
I read. It was all about the defenses. I guess I was shocked that he said that the defense team was actually investigating the drug theory. So I was like, oh, wow. Like, we've all been talking about it forever. I didn't know they seriously. Oh, and also, he talked a lot about Emma Bailey in this book. And I don't know, I just think that's telling. I think to put those people in the book, and
a few other people you kept pointing out too, right?
Yeah. And Demetrius. Yeah. And he said that the defense really checked into them, like went down that road. Now, I don't think he said it didn't go anywhere.
No,
he
didn't
just
say that.
Said that they were investigating that. So I said on that episode, I think I felt verified after, because that's my theory. I just think, I don't know how, I can't figure out how. And I know other creators that are trying to figure out the how too, like really make those connections. But yeah, I was shocked that he addressed that in the book.
And I think in our last episode, as we closed out this last episode, I think I had mentioned that that's the one conspiracy theory I could get behind, because how else can you get the police, you know, and all these people involved in something? It has to be very big,
right?
You know, about you know, that the police are involved, that universities are involved, you know, that fraternities are involved and their chapters and all this. It has to be something that big. So that theory holds water with me. The boyfriend, you know, and hey, I had a beef and and we're going to cover up stuff and, you know, have some guy be the
I think it's
patsy.
bigger than that.
Yeah, I think
Personally.
it can't be those, DoorDash driver or the boyfriend. I mean, I think those just don't have enough oomph behind them to like the drug theory does.
Mm-hmm. You got a compliment.
Me? That's impossible.
And the bunnies, Christy mentioned the bunnies.
Yeah, let me tell you something about that bunny cam real quick. All right. That has taken over our lives.
My whole summer has been bunnies, you guys.
Bunnies.
I'm sorry to change the topic.
This is the second litter. And for some silly reason, I said, hey, let's take our outdoor camera instead of having facing the garage, let's put it in the flower bed where
He's like, put it right in the bin with
holy smoke. I hear that thing going off all the time. The bunnies are jumping in and jumping out, and the bunnies and oh my gosh.
Yeah, if you don't know what we're talking about, I will post. I call it bunny cam. Because literally my whole summer has been watching babysitting. I go pick food for them and I put it in the little bed, and oh my goodness. But yeah, we have baby bunnies and I put videos up about them. Yeah. So it's funny.
All right. Howard Bloom.
Yeah, I know. Back to the topic. If earlier in our live, if you joined us late, I talked about how recently there was like the kingpin of this cartel, the one that El Chapo was a part of, that just got arrested. Let me know in the comments if you've heard that, if you saw that. And I shared a little bit about that, and I just thought, wow, there's so much of that, I'm going to call it F substance, that is running up through the area where this happened, that it just seems plausible that could be all connected, because I thought that there were other but here's the comment that someone left on that episode where I talked about that. All these people who are claiming that this was some huge stash house and thinks they would have anything valuable enough to warrant the killings obviously have never been involved in illegal activity. And they put LOL. No sensible dealer is going to have any significant amount of cash or product in a house that has dozens of drunk partying kids in and out all the time. There were strangers there, and even when the housemates weren't there. Also, the cops were there regularly. Also, not a criteria of a stash or trap house. Plus, none of them had any of the substances in their system. It's not about party favors. So I agree with everything this person said, but I still think it can have something to do with party favors, because it's about information being leaked, told, or it's about informing or rolling over on somebody. That's what I think. So I agree with everything that person said. I don't necessarily think there was stuff in the house.
And I think that was a aha moment for us, because we didn't know that he had the autopsy result of no drugs in their system. None of the people that were killed had the substances in their system. Yeah. So that was very interesting. Especially after a night of, partying. They just kept it to maybe beer and wine or whatever and left it at that. So,
yep.
So, I think with that covers the book. Any final thoughts or for you on the? I'm
reading the chat. I want to say hi to Nikki H. If I didn't say hi to you, thanks for joining. And here's a comment: that pilot better be on the Hideout. Are you talking about from following Brian, or is that just a discussion in the chat? Yeah, don't think the 4 were involved in it. So there's a comment, not that the 4 students in the house wouldn't be involved in that. I think it could still be related to it without them being involved in it.
Well,
doesn't mean that they're involved.
You're their parents, supposedly. So
I don't know.
Mm. Mm.
All right. We ready to wind this one down? I want to dig into that DNA. I think because you and I are bantering about that
Yeah.
would be a good topic to dive into. I'm going to find some clips and stuff about that.
And there was also you told me the other day that some documents got released. We don't know if there's any substance.
Oh, yes.
to that.
I do want to cover that too.
Yep. So maybe we can look in to see what that is and
Yep.
talk about that maybe. But I like doing the lives. I like doing the scripted shows as well, even though it's really not that scripted. But
yeah, we think we're going to eventually try to get into a routine where we're like a recorded show a week and a live a week at least. So, especially when I go back to work.
Yeah, she's on summer vacation right now. Bless her heart. So,
but I thank everyone so much for joining us tonight. We hope you join us back next time.
Yeah.
We're going to end this now. So,
play our little play-in video.
Yep, I got an outro for us. But good night, everybody.
Good night.
So high I'm hypnotized. What's up is down, what's left is right. Chasing stars and holding you. I can't see the end, but we'll see it through. Times don't fly too high. Be sure to keep the ground in sight. Fly forever if you keep it tight. Love the world but keep the sky on your mind.